Thank you, Madam Chair. Want to echo comments made by all my colleagues. Want to thank you, Ms. Davenport, your budget team. Want to thank all of our budget team for the work that they do to prepare us to have this conversation. I really want to thank those who've participated in our budget town halls. We had one late Monday, our second one, where we've really continued to try to work with community to talk about our budget process, engage them in dialogue. Want to thank all of the kind of grass tops and grassroots organizations. There were about 24 who participated Monday for their perspective and input. And then I woke up today with a gut punch and thought, wow, this feels like, when I went to the legislature in 2010, or when I made the decision to go to the legislature in 2008. And I was trying to look it up to figure out what the deficit was in 2008 when I was, running a service providing organization and had to take out a line of credit to pay child care providers because the state budget was late. And it was about the same. The 2009-10 budget had a $60 billion problem. The 08-09 budget had what began as a $24 billion deficit that I believe grew. And I remember the cuts and the pain that caused residents. So if I could start with a couple questions, Ms. Davenport. I look at your pie chart that I appreciate, thank you. And I understand that the primary buckets of money which are the ingredients in your pie, would be federal, state, and property taxes. So help me understand, when I look at public assistance and health and our health and human services budget, right, that 26% to 33%, like what percentage of that relies on state funding?
I don't have the exact percentage, but I would say it's the overwhelming majority. And so we call that federal and state subvention. The way that funding works is that the county sometimes is required to put matching funds on the table. So we put our local dollars on the table, and then what it allows us to do is draw down an even greater amount. So for our social services departments and our health departments, they are overwhelmingly funded by federal and state dollars.
So when in our budget process, so the state has to pass their budget by June 15th, the constitutional deadline. It goes into effect July 1. When in our budget process do we then factor in that reality? Because we could pass, when does that happen?
Yes.
I go back to your.
So in a good budget year, we would look at what's signaled and what's proposed in the governor's proposed budget in January. And that sort of gives us, in some ways, a North Star in terms of potential impacts for our recommended budget in April. So oftentimes we are negotiating or advocating with the state for more resources, not necessarily to avoid cuts. In a situation such as this, we have a couple of opportunities depending on when we have finality. We have the final changes budget that's coming up in June to make adjustments if we had to pivot quickly. But if there are additional budgetary enactments, let's say, even later after the June 15th date for the state legislature, we also have supplemental budget. So our budget is so large that we really can't button up our budget in final changes in June. And so this is one of the reasons why the three-phase budget process gives us flexibility to make adjustments. Ideally for us, Supervisor, we wouldn't want any cuts or curtailments to our programs. The earlier we know in our budget process, the more time we have to prepare. And so now I feel like we're on a very limited timeline. So we're gonna see what happens. I understand this information is being rolled out in phases. And so we and our team and your teams and the departments, we're going to be huddling down over the next couple of weeks to see what adjustments, if any, needs to be made for final changes. And if we can't get them all done by final changes, then we're looking to supplemental in October.
And the county, unlike the state, you know, when Jerry Brown was elected governor, his second go round, he created, you know, set up the rainy day funds. There are a number of rainy day funds. There's an entitlement program rainy day fund that was created to try to stop the huge kind of ebb and flow expansion of CalWORKs, cut of cash. I mean, and so they have resources, they have a fund they can tap into. The county doesn't have that kind of rainy day fund, if you will, I assume, where if the cuts to our safety net programs are so draconian that we can tap into to try to.
That is correct, Supervisor. We do have a rainy day fund. We contribute to it every year as part of our normal fiscal practice. But if we were looking at sustained ongoing cuts as is proposed in the May revise, we would not be able to absorb those cuts with our rainy day fund because some of those cuts are ongoing and they are not small amounts. And so even if we were able to deploy some of the funds in a rainy day fund, they would not be sufficient to cover ongoing cuts in the out years.
And when you recognize that basically the LA County is 1/3 of the state, and so when I always looked at the budget at the state level, 1/3 of an expansion would benefit LA County, 1/3 of a cut hits LA County. And we're talking about cuts too. I think somebody talked about transition age youth housing, and we know that's the population that, if we don't support them, fuels our homeless youth population. We talked about, I understand that there are cuts to childcare slots that prevent people from going to work or going to school. The CalFresh expansion, that's been clawed back. So, I understand that the governor had a presser yesterday where he kind of came for the counties, not just LA County, but he put counties on blast, and we can take it. We are clear, we are the safety net. And we also stepped up and are willing on the expansion programs that were important to him. I'm not sure how we are expected to provide mental health services, to keep people housed, to prevent the inflow, as was talked about yesterday, into our homeless population if both of our arms are tied behind our back. And the cuts that I read about briefly last night from CSAC, the texts I received this morning from service providers and legislators asking about how will LA County manage this, I very quickly said not well. I'm not sure how we're supposed to do it. I don't believe we at the county level are shying away from our responsibilities. We are leaning in, but we can't do it based on what you just helped me to understand, the source of the funding for us to do it. So you can't give us new programs to implement if you are pulling the rug out from under us, which in effect pulls the rug out from under our shared constituency. So after my gut punch yesterday, I then said to my team, okay, well, where is the money in the state budget? And, we cannot be so naive as to say, well, if we close 2 more prisons, well, on the policy level, I support that, but that doesn't make money appear overnight July 1. They have an MOU with the Correctional Officers Association that they're locked into for multiple years, so they could probably close them all, and we wouldn't score enough savings to fill this kind of hole. So we're all going to have to be thoughtful, creative. The advocacy community is going to have to help us be thoughtful and creative about how we help the state identify resources and how we continue to have the prioritization conversation, recognizing that we are the safety net. We are the safety net. The state needs to come up with their priority mountain, and it needs to not push poor people off the side, or people who are unhoused, or people who are suffering from mental illness, or people who are incarcerated. I'm just not sure how they expect us to do all the work they are asking of us with the proposal we saw yesterday. It gives me great cause for concern. We will have people, I'm sure, here, who are going to be here today to talk about expansion. And the question will be, expand with what? With the kind of cuts we saw. So I hope that we too can put on our county website the information about the proposed state cuts, a clear understanding about the pie chart, about where the lion's share of our money comes from. And if the state is talking about a $7 billion cut or whatever cut, that 1/3 of that, conservatively speaking, is going to hit LA County.